next we've got Matt from the wonderful world of fisheries. So Matt, welcome, and please tell us about yourself, your role in the wonderful fisheries industry, and also a bit about your background as to how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So I work for the Fisheries Research Development Corporation. So it's, I guess, a government body that administers a fair chunk of research in aquaculture and fisheries these days. It's a bit about the industry itself. It's about a $3.5 billion industry now for fishing and aquaculture. Not a lot of people really get that a fair chunk of that is now aquaculture rather than fisheries. So about 2 or 3 years ago, aquaculture became the dominant force in the fisheries and aquaculture space. It takes up about $2 billion worth of production. The rest of it's the fisheries side of things. A bit of background about me. So I grew up in Western Sydney, actually near where Luciano is right now, in the Hawkesbury region. I had a grandfather that used to love breeding koi carp. I'm not sure if anyone knows what they are, but they're really fancy carp, basically. Pretty ones, not the ones that get down the Murray. I loved it. I was 16 years old. Got to watch him go through that whole function of breeding. And years old, I packed up my stuff, moved down to Tassie and did a degree in aquaculture. Stayed down there for a little bit, did a doctorate because I like being at uni. That's pretty much the only reason. And then went to work for the salmon farms down in Tassie. I've had a fairly, I would say, a diverse career path since then. Worked for the salmon farms for a little bit. So I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with the salmon industry or the salmon that we get in Australia. Most of it comes from Tasmania, from a handful of farms down in Tassie. Worked there for about 1.5 years. It was amazing. There's nothing like getting out in the water at 6 a.m. in the morning in the middle of summer in Tas. I can't imagine there's any better place on the planet to be working, to be honest. And then I ended up in a teaching role. One of the things that if any of the students are watching, are going to need, if you ever want to get into the fisheries and aquaculture space, is you're going to need some training, quite a lot of it. So for about 10 years, I worked in the training space. So we worked with students, existing employees, people looking to get into the industry, and help them to develop the skill sets so they can actually start to work in the industry safely and effectively. I did that for about a decade, and now I moved up to Victoria to start this role with the FRDC. So my job at the moment is to basically go around and talk to fishermen and help them work with the science that's been produced and help them implement that sort of science into the real world. And that's kind of it in a nutshell, really.
Fantastic. Thanks, Matt. And you've just highlighted something really important about the fact is we do talk about agriculture, and agriculture encompasses fisheries and forestry, as I mentioned. And I think it's really important to think about the fact that fisheries play such an important role in our primary industries in Australia. And you just mentioned some really important data about the value of the fisheries industry and aquaculture as well. And they're really important concepts. And a lot of schools do have aquaculture, aquaponics. That's another area that's growing and growing. We have a lot of schools ask us about aquaponics. And it's really important to think about fisheries as an integral part of that whole big picture of agriculture. That's really important. The other thing that you mentioned is about science. And a lot of times we don't think agriculture, forestries and fisheries is a science, but it is. It's very much so. Can you just maybe explain a little bit more about what science is involved in fisheries?
Yeah, so it's incredibly diverse when it comes to science, and it depends on the area that you're talking with. But I'll give you an example. The salmon farms down in Tasmania. A fair bit of the work they do there around science might be around optimizing when they go out to sea. So we do a lot of research around that. It might be selective breeding programs so we can breed the best salmon so they can survive in the conditions in this changing world that we have. Some of the science that we're heavily focused on around now is to deal with climate change. So that's obviously the big pressing issue that we have coming forward. So it'll be predicting the impact of climate change on fisheries and working out ways so we can get ahead of that problem before it becomes a problem in the first place. It might be optimizing fisheries strategies, or how do we solve the sea urchin problem in Tasmania as they come through and wipe out most of the kelp down that way. It might be looking at innovative strategies around breeding new species of animals, particularly fish. One of the big problems we have in Australia is that we don't eat a lot of different species in Australia. We import a lot of our seafood, and a big part of what we need to be doing is changing that. So there's a fair bit of research going on in Australia at the moment about species diversification. Can we breed different species that still taste good and we can make it also profitable? So that's where the science sort of sits. Genetics,
wow,
stuff.
That's just amazing. You've opened up a whole new world in terms of those aspects of science, but all the possible careers and jobs that are in that little discussion that you've just had. So it really is complex, but really exciting. And for all of our primary industries, science and the research and development that goes on in our industries is really a driver for the future. And I think there's so many opportunities in the future in terms of developing new ways in which we can breed animals and fish, but also crops and plants and the like. And so the sky's the limit. And I think we're big leaders in the world when it comes to that sort of research and development. And we're very fortunate that we have all the research and development corporations who are all leading the way with the work that they're doing. That's a really good insight. Thanks so much, Matt. That was wonderful.